Hello there everybody, and welcome to another of our pre-auction videos, the third one of the year, and for a bumper sale of nearly 600 lots. This following on from the very successful extra auction that we held in September, which was obviously followed by the hugely successful drinks party, which so many of you came and enjoyed and drank us out of house and home. There were a few sore heads at the OMRS convention the following morning, so all very successful. But this sale happening on Thursday the 24th. By now the print catalogue will be with you, and bidding is very much open online on SPINK Live. And as always, we will be here, the three of us, to run you through a few of our favourite lots. So why not? I'll begin with lot 424, the cover lot, and a really proud moment for us all here. It's the third Victoria Cross in 3 auctions, the first time in many years it's happened here. And this one is an absolute cracker. It's the group of 4 awarded to Lieutenant Colonel Bertram Best Dunkley, the commanding officer of the 2nd 5th Battalion Lancashire Fusiliers. The Lancashire Fusiliers, obviously famous regiment during the Great War, the most decorated of any unit, to win 18 Victoria Crosses during the course of the Great War. And this is forever known as the Lost Victoria Cross. Of the 18 for the centenary of the end of the Great War, 17 of the 18 were gathered together at the Regimental Museum in Bury, but this one was not. It has surfaced in the 1980s, and actually rather charming. We've actually got the bill of sale from the 26th of September 1986 for the Group 2 VC Group to Best Dunkley, paid for by cheque. Here's the group. It's been with a private collector ever since. So yeah, it's been off the market for a good long while. What's special about this Victoria Cross? Well, it's a Lieutenant Colonel's group, and it is a posthumous award for the 31st of July 1917, the Battle of Passchendaele. And on that day, there were no less than 13 Victoria Crosses and 1 bar to the Victoria Cross, that of Noel Travass, which were awarded for that day. And having spent a lot of time fiddling around in a number of reference books, I am able to confirm that this is one of only 2 that remain in private hands. This award, which we will offer on the 24th, and the group of Second Lieutenant Hewitt of the Hampshire Regiment. The final 2 groups which remain in private hands. On that day, but Best Dunkley showed his true colours. He led his men from the front, but he was tragically killed in action, being mortally wounded and passing away just a couple of days later. He had a pretty remarkable Great War. Before the outbreak of the war, he was a schoolmaster working out in China, and when the Great War started, he hot-footed it all the way across Russia, just to get back to claim his commission, and then was off to the Western Front. He ended up in command of his battalion. He survived the first use of German mustard gas attack on Ypres, and then was with his men at the front on that famous day at Passchendaele. The lovely story behind this one is further learned through the book by Floyd Hope, At the Front with Best Dunkley, and that includes a lot of very personal interactions with the character. In the months and years before his final glorious action, he was a bit of an enigma to some of his men. Some of them, he didn't get on with them too well, but when the time grew closer to their big day, they all saw what he was about, why he was being so harsh, why he was, working them absolutely to the bone. It was to make sure they were prepared for that final action, and he really showed his mettle on that day. It's a fantastic group, and it's one which we are sure will do very well. It's got a pre-sale estimate of £200,000 to £240,000, and following on from the smashing result of Drummer Ritchie's Victoria Cross in July, which made £360,000, and Arthur Scarf's Victoria Cross, which made £550,000 hammer in the spring, this one is sure to do well. So keep an eye out for it. Do go and give it a read. And yeah, it's just a fantastic cross, fresh to the market, and well worth a bid. So we move on from the Army, and why not we go to the Royal Air Force and lot 479, sold by order of the family. This absolutely cracking CGM flying, awarded to Warrant Officer Dusty Dew, a gallant Halifax flight engineer, and he earned this rare accolade on the night of the 27th of May 1944, when his Halifax was rounded on by 3 night fighters. They were shot up, raked, very badly damaged was the aircraft. Dusty himself was terribly badly wounded, shot through a number of times, lost a dreadful amount of blood, but nonetheless, he held the aircraft together almost single-handedly. The pilot wanted them to bail out, but he made the decision that he was going to be able to put one of the engines back into action, which he did. He was passing out due to the loss of blood, but nonetheless, he rallied his crew around him and ensured that they made it home safely, and all the crew made it back. Dusty was so badly wounded that he had to have his right foot amputated as a result, and that effectively ended his war. He'd previously served on Malta, so you see the Malta commemorative on the end, but just a smashing group. Obviously, just over 100 CGMs flying awarded for the Second World War. And Dusty was very proud of his band of brothers, and was a key member in the associations, the meetups of the recipients of the CGM. And he tracked down many of the living recipients. And it's just a fantastic story, again, with all the flying logbooks. And yeah, it's a cracking group, 16 to 20,000. And last sold a CGM flying 3 or 4 years ago, which reached a very similar mark. So with the market in very strong health, you'd hope that this will go and do very well on the 24th. So that's lot 479. And sticking with the Second World War, I'm going to move on to this absolutely knockout battalion commanders, Fall of Malaya DSO, Prisoner of War Camp Commanders OBE, and Battle of Combrai 1918 group to Brigadier Mordaunt Elrington of the Loyal North Lancashire Regiment. Mordaunt was named after one of the founders of the regiment, and he followed in footsteps, obviously, of the family. And the story of the Loyal North Lancs in Malaya is an absolutely spellbinding one. You really should go and read the catalogue if you haven't already. Well worth taking a look at. There's been very few groups to those who commanded battalions or were in senior command for the Fall of Malaya to come up. This group has been off the market for several decades, having last appeared in the SPINK Circular. And a couple of photographs of the recipient in the Prisoner of War camp, where he was, again, decorated for his part in being the liaison between the incarcerated prisoners and their Japanese captors. And he obviously had to face up to the dreadful conditions and the dreadful treatment that were meted out onto his men. The group carries a pre-sale estimate of 10 to 15,000, and following on from the smashing result of the Indian Order of Merit posthumous that we sold in the summer, which made over 20,000, you would expect this to have a strong showing. So there are 3 groups very quickly that I've covered. I'm now going to pass on to Harry, who's going to talk to you about a few of his favourite groups.
Thank you very much, Marcus. We start off today with this really splendid North Atlantic DSM and Amethyst Instant group to Chief Electrician Amory Austin. This comes from the family. It's got a really lovely collection of documents and photographs with it. You can see a couple of pieces here with the cap tally and the shoulder patch. So it's a really brilliant thing. Austin joined the Navy as boy second class. He was with HMS Drake when the war first broke out, and very quickly joined HMS Port Quebec, a mine layer, an auxiliary mine layer, for service in the North Atlantic. He saw that service really running through the North Atlantic and also convoys to Murmansk in Russia. There are some brilliant stories told, as it were, through family tradition of him particularly not enjoying the food in North Russia. A lot of canned fish in tomato sauce, apparently, which didn't go down very well. The DSM, sadly, there is no citation for it, but again, family tradition does step in, and he believed certainly that the DSM was the result of his diffusing a depth charge which had come loose and was rolling about the back of the ship. Obviously a very dangerous situation. The story goes that he sat on it and held it down to allow it to then be properly diffused. At this point, Austin was specialising in torpedoes. He then moved on to electronics and also moved on to HMS Cook. It was here, unfortunately we don't have the MID emblem on his group. However, he did win the MID and we do have the documentation for that. A really wonderful story of him minding the sonar equipment whilst they were hunting a U-boat. Cook got 2 U-boats throughout the war. They also conducted a number of Arctic convoys and saw some really, really heavy fighting there. At the end of the war, he was posted as an electrician to HMS Consort. Consort at this point was serving as the guard ship to the British Embassy in Nanking, and it was here that they were stationed when HMS Amethyst, cruising up the river to relieve them on their post, was attacked. Consort steamed downriver to try and help and take her under tow, but obviously came under very heavy fire from communist forces on the riverbank. They were unable to get through. Austin at this time was working as an electrician aboard Consort, and in fact at this point he was very good friends with the ship's doctor, Dr. Bentley, and as the ship came under fire, power in the doctor's surgery failed, and it was Austin who was called upon to go and fix the power, and found himself in the middle of jury-rigging the lighting for that room, pulled into assisting the doctor with his surgery as the ship was rocked by shells and near misses. Again, a number of stories coming from this period. One of having to restrain a burning man who'd been set alight until he could be put out. It's clear that this incident affected Austin a great deal, and the lot does come with letters from his wife and son talking about the stories that he told of those incidents, which do make for really fascinating reading. Austin was later given the grim duty of helping to sew those sailors who were unfortunately killed in the fighting into their hammocks for burial at sea. He left the Navy not long after with the rank of chief electrician and ended up retiring to Canada. This is lot number 434, and it has an estimate of £1,800 to £2,200, and a really, really fascinating archive to go with it. We then move on to the tragic and extremely important Isandlwana Casualty Zulu Medal, awarded to Private Owen Hughes of the 1st 24th Foot, who was killed at the battle. He is confirmed on the casualty roll as having been killed, along with obviously a great many of his companions. It comes with, again, a really astounding archive, a great many letters and other pieces of personal effects, and of course the box of issue and envelope of issue addressed to his father. And this really particularly touching piece, a card detailing his death and his place of burial, written to his father, or typed to his father, which is written as his father was a Welsh speaker in Welsh. And that is a really touching thing. Obviously, some 1,300 men killed at the battle, and Hughes is one of the 5 companies of the 1st 24th to have been killed there. This is lot number 61, and it comes with an estimate of £8,000 to £10,000. Moving on then to the final of the groups that I'm going to talk about today, the really astounding, almost 3 separate groups in one group, as it were, to Colonel Dennis White of the Royal Northumbrian Fusiliers. White started his military career enlisting as a private in August 1914, with the first wave of those to enlist on the outbreak of the Great War. He was very quickly commissioned in September 1915 and joined the battalion in France. He was present for the Battle of Loos and left an unpublished and unfinished, sadly, memoir, of which part is included in the lot. And this details part of his role in the Battle of Loos, as well as other parts of his career. As I say, it is unfinished, but there are some really fascinating stories in there, including his early days in the RAF, and part of that is detailed in the write-up for the lot. He did, as I have slightly spoiled, join the RAF in May 1918 and flew as an observer and gunner. During that time, he managed to acquire some 12 kills, 4 kills himself, 2 shared, and another 6 forced down, and flew with some of the great names of that late RAF, that late war RAF. A really fascinating lot in its own right, and of course he was awarded the MC in 1918 as well. Later, moving on to the interwar, he returns to the infantry, specifically the Northumbrian Fusiliers, and serves during the Great Iraq Revolt, and later with the North Persia Force. Apologies. Then moving on to the Second World War, he joins the Cheshire Regiment, commanding 1st Battalion, the Cheshire Regiment, as Lieutenant Colonel, and is there on Malta during the time of the Second Battle of Sirte, and is involved in the unloading of one of the 2 merchant ships to get through, the SS Pampas, which is, of course, under very heavy fire, under very heavy attack, and the 2 merchant ships that get through are both sunk in the harbour. The stevedores who are unloading the vital supplies flee the scene, and it was the 1st Battalion, Cheshire Regiment, who downed their guns and jumped into the half-sunk ship to rescue what they could. For this he was commended. Seeing some civil service with the Army of the Rhine after the war, he was later to retire in 1947 with the rank of colonel. This lot is estimated at £1,800 to £2,200. Thank you very much, and I will now pass you over to Robert to close us out.
Thank you very much indeed, Harry. So yes, I'm going to round off a little video with a few of my selections from the upcoming auction. And as regular viewers will expect, my selection is again, in fact, purely Napoleonic. And I have a very nice selection of Naval General Service medals, a single Military General Service medal, and then rounding off with an Army of India. So all really, really good stuff. And we've been very privileged in this sale to have an unusually nice number of very good early Naval General Service medals. So I will start off with actually lot 1, which is this single clasp NGSM for the glorious 1st of June in 1794 to a chap called William Rose Holden. Now, a very interesting individual indeed. Holden actually served at the glorious 1st of June on board one of the frigates, HMS Niger. Now, the frigates didn't actually play much of a part in the battle itself, which was left to the ships of the line. So the frigate's duties were to essentially sail up and down behind the British line, relaying messages as necessary along the fleet. But nevertheless, Holden was very much involved and, of course, received this medal in later life. But what really makes this lot particularly interesting is the vast archive that accompanies it. Now, this has never appeared at auction before. This has been with the family for all these years. So it's the most exciting sort of lot you would hope to find. And it is, of course, particularly charming that one can find things like an original portrait of William Rose Holden in later life as a member of the clergy. So after serving in the Navy only very briefly, he joined the church and lived a long and indeed rather prosperous life and died in old age, obviously having claimed his Naval General Service Medal along the way. What is also a particular highlight of this lot, it's not here to show you because it's rather fragile, is an original letter written by Holden's father to a family friend, which actually talks about his son's naval career and mentions him specifically being a midshipman and leaving the Navy through some form of infirmity. And it's quite amusingly referenced that his son wanted to leave the Navy to join the Royal Marines. And his father talks about the Marines being very drunken individuals and very low reprobates, and that if his son wanted to join the Marines, then his father would have nothing to do with it. So a very good sort of naval and marine rivalry going on there, which I'm sure will amuse one or two of you when you read the catalogue. So that is lot 1, the very nice NGSM, and it has an estimate of £4,500 to £5,500. So moving on then to, perhaps quite naturally, lot 2, another Naval General Service Medal. Again, a single clasp, but this possibly the most iconic clasp you could find with the Naval General Service Medal, that for the Battle of Trafalgar on the 21st of October, 1805. And this particular medal was awarded to Ordinary Seaman Peter Cherry. Now, Cherry was a member of the ship's company on one of the most famous ships of the Napoleonic Wars, HMS Temeraire, known as the Fighting Temeraire, of course. And the Temeraire was very much in the thick of the fighting for the whole of the battle. A 98-gun three-decker. If you collect NGSMs to Trafalgar, arguably I would say you couldn't get much better unless you had a medal to a member of the ship's company on HMS Victory herself. And the Temeraire was in the thick of the fighting throughout the whole thing. She raced Nelson's own Victory to be the first to break the Franco-Spanish line. And indeed, Temeraire's captain was personally told off by Nelson and ordered to resume his place astern of Nelson's flagship. She saved Victory from being overwhelmed by French and Spanish ships, from being boarded and possibly captured, herself captured several Franco-Spanish ships, and indeed Peter Cherry, from the records that we have looked at and are available, was indeed a member of the prize crew on board one of those ships that was sailed back to Gibraltar, which sadly foundered on the way. Peter Cherry, of course, survived, and it is a wonderfully evocative medal. And it is, as I said, lot 2, with an estimate of £6,000 to £8,000. And of course, again, if you like your Trafalgar medals, I expect there will be some spirited bidding immediately upon opening the sale. So, moving on then to lot 6, another, indeed the final NGSM that I'm going to talk about here, is a very nice 2-clasp medal. And of course, once you get beyond the single-clasp medals, these start to get very rare and desirable indeed. So we have 2 clasps here for Algiers and a boat service action in 1812. And this was awarded to an officer, Commander William Caswell of the Royal Navy, who participated actually in a number of boat actions during his career, but this was the only one that was subsequently awarded a clasp for. And Caswell was a fascinating character because he actually started off life on the lower deck as an ordinary seaman, but was clearly an individual of both learning and knowledge, because he was very swiftly, within a couple of years, promoted from the lower deck to become a junior officer, a master's mate, midshipman, lieutenant, etc. What is also very interesting from the records that do exist, that he was actually captured by Malay pirates at one point and kept prisoner for a rather significant amount of time before he was released. It didn't necessarily do his career any harm. He went on to see a huge amount of service during the Napoleonic Wars and was dangerously wounded during an attack on an American privateer during the War of 1812. So there's a wonderful American and War of 1812 connection to this particular individual, which again you can read all about in the catalogue. What's also very interesting about this individual is that in later life he went on to settle in Australia, and he built a house that actually still exists, and it's known as one of the oldest houses in the whole of Australia. And you can again look it up. I put some links in the catalogue that you can Google, and you can look up Tanilba House and read all about Caswell in the catalogue. So I think again it's a wonderful thing. I've done lots of research into his career, and it has an estimate of £4,000 to £5,000. So moving on from the Navy to the Army. With Lot 12, which is the Military General Service Medal with 4 clasps for the Peninsular campaigns, awarded to Lieutenant Edward Wells Bell of the 7th Royal Fusiliers. Now, Bell was a very interesting individual who joined the regiment after the famously bloody Battle of Albuera in 1811 and went on to see service with the regiment for the rest of the Peninsular War. At the end of the Peninsula, the 7th, along with Bell, went off to fight in America for the War of 1812 and indeed the New Orleans campaign. And in fact, Bell was present with the battalion on that famously, again, bloody occasion when Sir Edward Pakenham's force attacked Andrew Jackson's force, and they were very heavily defeated. Thankfully for Bell, of course, the 7th were not particularly heavily engaged on that occasion, and so he lived to fight another day. Bell stayed with the army after the Napoleonic Wars and in fact made his way all the way up through the ranks to become a full general by the end of his life. But what is also particularly interesting about Bell is that his son also followed in his footsteps, joined the army, joined a Fusilier regiment, the 23rd Royal Welsh Fusiliers rather than the 7th, and in fact went on to fight in the Crimean War, where he won the Victoria Cross. And essentially this was for capturing several Russian cannon, and lived to claim his VC, and the VC is in existence. Wouldn't it be wonderful to think that father and son may well be reunited after a long period of time of being separated? So it's quite exciting to think that that may well happen on the 24th of November. So Lieutenant Edward Wells Bell's Military General Service Medal comprises Lot 12 with an estimate of £1,400 to £1,800. And let's see what happens. And I hope it really does go to the best of homes. So to round off my selection here, we have Lot 13, which again is a very nice Army of India medal. With 2 clasps, again, quite a rare thing this, and particularly as these 2 clasps are to some of the earlier battles of the Indian campaigns. These were during the days of Arthur Wellesley in India, long before he became the Duke of Wellington. And this particular medal was awarded to, as I've said in the catalogue, and I won't escape from saying it here, the splendidly named Major Skeffington Lutwidge of the 11th Madras Native Infantry. And the clasps are for the battles of Argam and the Siege of Gawilga, both in 1803. Now, as the medal, of course, was not authorised until the early 1850s, they are very rare things indeed, and particularly multi-clasp medals. And indeed, Major Lutwidge's 2-class medal to this regiment is indeed unique. There is not another one in existence. And one can only imagine the service that he saw in those early battles. He was out in India from the 1790s right through. He was still serving up to almost the end of the Napoleonic Wars. And again, you can read in the catalogue the research that I put into his military career. I think there's more research to do on him as well. I think he's potentially quite an exciting character who spent a long time out in India. The other interesting thing about it is that he's actually a relative, I've not exactly pinned down quite how, of a chap called Lewis Carroll, who of course is famous for writing Alice in Wonderland and indeed Jabberwocky. So Lewis Carroll's name was actually Lutwidge, and so there's a connection there that I'm sure can be explored too. So it's a rare medal with some very evocative clasps. You can read more in the catalogue, and again, I hope it'll do extremely well. The estimate is £3,000 to £4,000. And hopefully I am going to be on the rostrum for all these lots, so you'll see me up there doing my thing and getting them all going and getting some good results in as well. So that covers all our selections for you today. As Marcus introduced, the sale is on the 24th of November. We start at 10 o'clock. Lots to get through, nearly 600 lots, but I'm sure it's going to be a fantastic day. We look forward to welcoming a number of you into the room on the auction day, and also, of course, seeing lots of you online. We hope you've enjoyed what we've had to talk about, and look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Thank you very much.